Welcome to Mornings on Main, Priming an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. Just to remind everybody, you're coming into a webinar, so you don't have to worry about muting yourself or your camera. All that's taken care of automatically, but we do want interaction. And actually, Casey, I think we have a little feedback from you. If you would mute for just a second. Or Gayla, we'll see. I think it was Casey, yeah. You can, we want you to interact. So there is a Q&A place where you can ask questions, and I'll moderate those questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to ask them as we're going through the webinar. And also there is a chat function where you can chat or put things in the chat. I will pop some things into the chat as Casey does his presentation. He's got a QR code in his PowerPoint, but I went ahead and translated it into a web address just to make it easy for you to click through as the webinar is going on. So we do want that interaction. Feel free to ask questions and those sorts of things. Also, I'm going to let Gayla do a little commercial for our state conference that's coming up at the end of July, and we'd love to see all of you there.
Yes, we would. So get registered. We have early bird registration until July 1st. So we would love to see you all. And I know we have more people coming in to participate this morning, but we also have a special rate for our states that cross the lines, you know, our bordering states. So we have some information that's going to be going out in an email and a constant contact to you all, because of course we love to have you guys. It just brings another dynamic to our state conference when we have people from other states coming in as well. But we have an amazing conference scheduled and amazing speakers, and simultaneously we have 3 and 4 sessions going on and tours, and you know, you name it, we have it going on for 3 days. So you all should be there.
Oops.
We missed.
All right. Kate. Yes, there we go. My PowerPoint has a mind of its own this morning.
That's good. Keith always does an amazing job for us, though. So we're excited to have Casey with us. As we just talked about, we love to hear from other states and what they're doing, and we love to bring it to all of our network here in Missouri, because we are a rip off and duplicate, just like Kansas and Iowa and our other bordering states. So we're really excited to have Casey with us this morning. So Casey is the executive director of Emporia, Kansas. If you all haven't been there, I highly recommend you to go to Emporia. Casey worked with his family in a retail and agricultural jobs prior to starting to volunteer at Emporia. Keith and I were just talking about that. He started like many of us start. We start as volunteers, we get on the board, and then they're like, hey, you'd be a great executive director. So Casey, they picked a great one in you. So we're really glad that you're there. Casey also started a business called Placemakers LLC, and he also helps communities within Kansas and other Main Street communities to sustainable economic growth through community and economic development practices. So Casey has a lot of experience that he's going to share with us, but one shout out, or actually 2 shout outs. So Emporia, Kansas is a Great American Main Street Award winner. Woohoo, yes. And Emporia also got the the award or notoriety from USA Today as being a great Main Street community. So very, very good plays there, Casey.
Yeah. And I wanted to add on that I saw this presentation at the national conference in Boston. And with all the entrepreneurship work we're doing this year with National Main Street and Kaufman, I felt this was a kind of a great presentation to get everybody kind of energized and some new ideas on working with entrepreneurs. So I think we're ready, Casey.
Okay. Thanks for having me, everyone. I appreciate you taking some time out this morning to listen to this presentation. This is a pared down version of what we presented in Boston, along with some updates that we've included since that presentation. First, I wanted to introduce kind of our team that we deal with in Emporia. Jeremy Wharton is our fabrication lab manager. Jessica Buckholz is our community development coordinator that usually deals with a variety of our different events and volunteer activities. Lydia Kimball is our intern. She's away this summer, interning for Senator Moran in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, I'm the executive director. I started as a 10-year volunteer for the Emporia Main Street program and then shifted in to that executive director role. I think I'm headed into my 15th year in that position. Emporia, Kansas, just to give you some background, we're a 24,000 person community with about a 54,000 person market trade area. So we are surrounded by some fairly small communities, and then we're an hour away in almost every direction from larger metro areas. We're a college town with Emporia State University and Fort Mills Technical College. About a third of our community is Latino. We're really known for alternative sports. So this past weekend, we had 4,000 riders in our community for a cycling event from all 50 states and 43 foreign countries. We also have large disc golf events and other sorts of alternative sporting events that emanate from the community. We have a history of entrepreneurship. We're going to go through this presentation relatively quickly, but we'll have some different links that have been provided for additional background information. And you're always welcome to reach out in the chat and talk with us about some of the things that we do more in depth. Working with Emporia Main Street, we found that there were some issues with our current development ethos. So mixed uses with housing, commercial and governmental and nonprofit were a little confusing for a lot of our potential investors. Entrepreneurial businesses are not standardized, so oftentimes we'll see an art gallery that's also a coffee shop, and those different blends are different for people that are outside the community. They don't necessarily recognize those immediately. And some of the naming of businesses, for some reason in downtowns, we have the address that becomes a name along with the word studio. And so people get a little confused about what we're all about in downtowns. And then even within the community, sometimes we have people that struggle with, are we looking forward to create vibrancy through entrepreneurship, or are we trying to recreate a memory of what occurred in the community in previous years? Some other problems we found with our current development ethos, there's the wish that somebody from outside the community would come in and just fix all of our problems for us. We know that that's not realistic. We have to fix our problems ourselves. And we have to understand that locals may have a different or deeper understanding of the opportunities within our communities. We often rely on people that don't have a lot of experience with the development of ecosystems. Our real estate agents are great, but they're there to sell or rent buildings, not necessarily to think about how that bigger picture works. And downtowns, because of their natural usage mix, are great spots for entrepreneurial hubs, but they have to have entrepreneurs that are in close proximity. And we need to brand ourselves as the place for entrepreneurs within the community. And unfortunately, a lot of the tools that we use within the development world, and both from an entrepreneurial development, physical development perspective, weren't designed for use in downtown. So we're oftentimes jamming square pegs in round holes when it comes to some of the different economic development incentives that we're trying to utilize within our downtowns if we don't develop those incentives ourselves. We also know that entrepreneurs are often influenced by entrepreneurial exposure. So at some point in their life, they have developed some sort of relationship with an entrepreneur that has developed a business or developed an event, an activity, and because of that exposure, they're more predicated, they're more willing to develop entrepreneurial businesses or activities themselves. So when we don't have as many entrepreneurs as we would like, it has a cascading negative effect because we have less exposure for people that may be great entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs adapt and solve problems creatively that aren't easy to teach or grade. So it's difficult to teach entrepreneurship within traditional educational environments. Profit considerations are critical for success, and we have a lot of people that deem themselves entrepreneurs that are what we call the live, laugh, love economy, where they want to do a thing, and that thing is important to them, but they haven't figured out how to monetize that. And because they haven't figured out how to monetize those different activities, they can have a short lifespan and create some negativity within your community. And there are just more barriers to entry than entrepreneurs have faced in the past, because they're competing not only locally, but with online environments and people that are more willing to travel more significant distances. So today, our focus is on covering real-world doable solutions for communities. And we're going to cover topics fairly quickly, and you'll see a variety of different QR codes, but the link is in the chat to some back files. And we'll leave some room for Q&A at the end of the session. So let's get started on some of those different real-world solutions. The first thing that we try and accomplish as a Main Street organization is entrepreneurial training. So any type of economic development effort should really start with entrepreneurial training and an emphasis on entrepreneurship at its core. Entrepreneurs attract and retain dollars within a region, and they offer uniqueness that helps define an area. So, you know, nobody's going to leave their Applebee's to go to your Applebee's from another neighboring community, but they'll go to your community if you've got something unique to offer. There is a, well, nobody helped me attitude among some community elements, and generally that's a selective memory. Help comes in many forms, and the more assistance that we can provide folks at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey, and then throughout that journey, the more successful businesses that we can have. You can sit and hope for better businesses and have community gatherings and cheerlead, but you've really got to do something about entrepreneurial development from a more substantive level, that foundational element through training and financing and place development that allows entrepreneurs to succeed. And, you know, something that all Main Street directors need to understand: entrepreneurs can sense other entrepreneurs. So if you struggle with entrepreneurship yourself, if you struggle with acting entrepreneurially, then they're going to be able to sense that. So upgrading yourself and upgrading your skill set from an entrepreneurial perspective is going to make you more successful when dealing with other entrepreneurs. We can work with traditional educational institutions, but we can't abdicate our position in providing entrepreneurial training. There is a bit of a stigma in some types of entrepreneurship, specifically in the tech realm, that if you go through the traditional educational environment, you're not really preparing yourself for that pivoting that's required for a great entrepreneurial ideation and follow through. So we have to understand that that model entrepreneur is rarely the straight A student. That's a fantastic public speaker. Usually these are the people that are trying to talk the teacher into a better grade. They understand how concepts make money, and that sort of monetization of their concept is baked into that very early stage of what they're trying to accomplish. You know, as I said, tech entrepreneurs often rebel against traditional ed, but we're finding more entrepreneurs beyond tech have that same sort of rebellious attitude. Education is often pushed to supply a pipeline of students to big businesses. And what we're trying to do through entrepreneurial enhancements is develop an entrepreneurial support pathway so that people can start up businesses within your local community. Accreditation, oftentimes in our educational institution, emphasizes credentials over working experience, and that real world experience is critically important as we're trying to develop entrepreneurs. To develop our entrepreneurs, work in a start your own business class environment. So we've been doing this for 16 years, and you can kind of see the class schedule on the screen. But we charge $100 per student and have a local bank sponsor. That sponsorship offsets costs associated with hosting and a few other minor costs, and $100 serves as a commitment for students, because we found if we give something away for free, they treat it like it's free and don't necessarily put the work in that results in a viable business opportunity. We rely on traditional media, social media platforms, and business advocates primarily our bankers and accountants and business attorneys and real estate agents that love it when people go through these different classes because they know they're serious. And previous graduates are highlighted to promote the classes of Pathway Forward. So let's briefly walk through those different classes. We have deciding on a business and business plan. The regional market and market research is something that we handle internally with placer data and other sorts of data. Staying legal, we have local attorneys and accountants that come in to talk about legal entities and those initial setups. We have field trips that really focus on businesses that are newly started, those that are in growth phase, and those that are at the end of their life cycle, because we like to plan on what those businesses will look like at the end and how they can transition those businesses. Employee-employer relations, because even if they start off small, they need to have HR components in place so that they can grow effectively, and how to manage their daily operations and business practices. E-commerce is something that we focus on because many people have to rely on people that have moved on from the community, or a larger geography that can be accomplished through e-commerce. And then we have people actually make pitches as part of their class period outside of a business plan. This is a collaboration with our Small Business Development Center. We break up each class into a question and answer period, followed by a traditional lecture that is usually done by me, and then guest speakers, and then we'll end the class with an example pitch then plan. Team building is really critical because a lot of these entrepreneurs have been told to go it alone and don't tell anybody about your idea. So we bake that in to the class by exposing people to subject matter experts. And we have to make sure that our speakers are willing to volunteer for the greater good, and not just say, hey, come spend your money with me as an accountant or as an attorney or whatever their specialty is. They're there to volunteer to make the region better. Classes aren't meant as a final step. So they're a step in the overall process to start and expand a business. And the speaker team relationship should carry on well beyond that startup activity. As I said earlier, we use something that's called a pitch then plan setup. And the goal, that's because the goal of the class is to teach entrepreneurship, not just how to operate their independent business concept. Effective entrepreneurial training can lead to serial entrepreneurs that open up several different businesses. And we've seen that happen through our SYOB class. Requiring business plans at the early stage can prevent pivots, and we prefer the pitch and plan approach because of that. So if people are committed to a business plan, even if they find out that business plan isn't going to work, we found in our early stages, they would stick with that business plan as opposed to the entrepreneurial mindset. And since we've changed over to a pitch then plan format, we've had people experience a lot more success. Pitch then plan contains the basic pitch elements that can be replicated for a variety of different business types. And we use a different example business each year, which helps entrepreneurs with the ideation process and creates a planning deck for market gaps. So when we identify market gaps within our community, we can develop a hypothetical business and then pitch that. And we've actually found that several people will take those pitched businesses and then make them part of their own community. We also know that we have to follow up. So we had a base curriculum year one that was based out of California. It did not work particularly well. So we scrapped it and started over with some ideas that came out of our entrepreneurs, things that they needed or questions that they had as they were starting up their business. We conduct year after year surveys with those entrepreneurs to tweak the class on a consistent basis, and have individual consultations with each and every one of our class graduates. We also go to our Economic Vitality Committee or Business Enhancement Committee in Emporia for their feedback, and we reach out with surveys through the local community for consumer priorities, things that they want to see happen in the community for businesses. We'll also work with the SBDC on projected growth sectors and then look at psychographic and generational shifts and the types of businesses that may emanate because of those shifts in our local community and pitch those as opportunities. We have an adjunct class that is specifically for product or tech-based businesses, and we call that our e-tech startups class. We just ran through the first version of that this spring. And our e-tech startups class helps people with that consumer outreach. We say that no tech business or product-based business survives first contact with consumers, and you have to adjust your concept by doing consumer interviews and outreach and focus groups prior to coming up with that final sort of business concept, and then go back to that and revamp that on a consistent basis. We've leveraged our relationship with the Center of Rural Innovation to make that happen. And there were 32 communities throughout the United States that were challenged with developing this sort of bridge curriculum. I think Emporia was the only one that pulled that off, and we're excited that we'll be beta testing our first tech business concept this fall that came out of the class. So our goal with this is to diversify our local economy through new types of entrepreneurship, while retaining our best and brightest and tying educational anchors to community success. After we have people that are going through the SYOB or e-tech startups process, we run into business incubation because now that we had a bullpen of entrepreneurs ready to go, we had to find spaces for them, and that was sometimes problematic. As we talk about incubation, for our purposes, incubation is a flex space term that can host a variety of different business types. Some forms of incubation are single space, like kitchen incubators, or multi-use office spaces like co-working centers. We can talk about those in the Q&A, but for our purposes today, we're just going to go through a basic incubation. Really, when we're looking at business incubators, we're talking about a hand-holding session that can guide entrepreneurs to success, but understanding that their business is their business. Most entrepreneurs are overwhelmed by the sheer number of decisions that startup and incubation can assist. Many entrepreneurs don't have deep teams because they've been told not to talk about their concept, and we become their teammate through the incubation process, where we have close contact on a daily basis. Location is really critical when you're talking about incubation. A lot of communities have struggled when somebody has offered them a building for $1 that's in a horrible location, and then they put a marginal business in that location, and they find out that if you put a marginal business in a bad location, they're going to fail fast. So having a great location that you can start with is critical for growing a business and growing the area. Close proximity to support leads to growth-based assistance that we can offer. Every startup has unforeseen startup expenses that can be mitigated if they're part of your overall ecosystem that you've built within your community. And really, we were afraid when we first started the incubator that we would be seen as competition for local property owners. But what we found was it became a recruitment hotspot for property owners that combated that competition fear because they could walk into a successful business that they knew was going to be in our area for a limited time frame, and then could be a permanent tenant in their building. It's important to clarify rights and responsibilities up front, and we have some of that documentation that's included within the link that you were provided. Incubation is conceptually weird for communities at first. So interactive marketing and storytelling is really important for your local media. And we want to look for complete concepts that are being pitched to us through a pitch process. So not a, well, I'm thinking about this and we may add this, and I don't know, there may be a third thing. Look for something that's a complete concept that you can place in the given space. Know the businesses that you can and cannot incubate within the space. So for example, we don't have a hood system or restaurant sort of amenities within our space. So that's a business that we can't incubate. And we require a board and business enhancement committee or economic vitality input within incubation. And then we find ourselves interviewing the person, just understanding, does their personality fit with what we're trying to achieve within the downtown? Are they going it alone, or do they have more of a team mentality where they want to help grow the community? From a business management perspective, we have to understand if people need additional financing or fundraising to expand out of their incubated space. We need to be able to track sales and identify those push or pivot points that the incubated business may need. Trox Gallery and Gifts, our first incubated business, started up about 3 weeks before the pandemic hit. So you better believe we had to help pivot that business substantially. And understand that it's a really happy day when they grow out of the incubated space and are in their permanent space, not something that we have to celebrate. So Trox, the business that I just mentioned, is our first incubated business. They're basically a artist cooperative and gift store that started up. They represent, I think, over 100 artists now in their current location, and provided them a space to sell their art both in store and online, and do setups within other businesses for temporary art displays. They also run our Emporia First Friday Art Walk, which gives additional exposure to artists. And their new shared space, they have their art gallery up front. There's a coffee shop in back. And really they're the hub for locally or regionally made art in Emporia. Our second incubated business, which will graduate from their space in the first quarter of this year, and they've actually found their permanent space, so that may come a little sooner, is called Imaginarium, and they are an educational outreach business that also sells smart toys. They have classes for kids. They have camps for children. They also have online support for homeschooled folks, and they provide STEM support for a really wide geographic region where they'll take their STEM teachers out into schools to supplement STEM education in a variety of different school districts. So we're excited about that. We already have applications coming in for our third incubator after Trox moves out to the permanent location. Fabrication labs, that's something that we've run for over a year now, and had plans for several years before that. But it's basically a place where we can create items for businesses that can help them mitigate competition that's based strictly on price, and help aid batch manufacturing and expanding sales outside their own four walls. When we look at a lot of problems hitting our communities like housing and childcare and gentrification, dilapidation, these are often income-based problems, which can be made worse by concentrations in supply chains and increase in competition for sales, because people are selling the same item over and over again in different formats. Independents with growth potential can often use fabrication labs to create their own products, and then they can be the only place in the world that you can find a particular item. Prototyping singular items through private sourcing can cost about $20,000 to $30,000 and take a long time. Foreign sourcing to assist with prototyping can lead to duplication issues, which can completely erode any profit that you were expecting to make with that initial investment. There's an inventor class that exists in every community, but oftentimes they have no outlet. And modern product development often includes the digital representation of some different items. The picture that you're looking at is one of the weird things that we worked on. This is Green Dot Bioplastics, where we used our 3D printing capacity in our fabrication lab to create a negative that they laid a bioplastic film on to create biodegradable coffee cup lids. And that's one of the several, I think we've worked with 45 different businesses over this past year to create prototyped items. When you're funding your fabrication lab, there are lots of different funding opportunities through USDA, including the RDBG program. And we have our app included within the QR code. But like any startup, count on being cash negative within that area for 2 to 3 years. and look at diversifying your income streams to create value through project charges, through classes, through creating your own products through the fabrication lab, and we'll cover some of those briefly. Some of the different equipment that we have within our fabrication lab. First we had to find what type of equipment we needed for our area, which may be different for your area, and know that we needed to supplement what our market had without competing. But we have 3D printers in a few different formats, both liquid and then the more PLA sort of format, and supporting elements with alcohol washes and other sorts of setting materials. There's software. Fusion 360 is our dominant 3D design software. We have a laser cutter and engraver through Boss, a large format printer and cutter, which we use for a variety of different materials, and a CNC computer numerical control machine that's a milling machine, 3D scanner, so we can create 3D representation of different items, a format mold machine, and an electronic station. We also have feature elements that we're working on with cost benefit analysis for all of those different machining pieces. So when we think of Main Streeters, one of the things that we often think about is marketers or event planners, entrepreneurial development specialists, preservationists. Fabrication specialists are just a different mindset. So as you're starting up your fabrication lab or makerspace, just don't expect every team member to flex into every job skill. Put people in positions to succeed and adjust to your team. Jeremy is brilliant when it comes to fabrication and making 3D items and coming up with unique product solutions. But if I made him do this webinar, he would probably quit on the spot. So just know who you're working with and help them achieve their goals within your team. Frozen here for a second. There we go. So we have a variety of different products that we have created within the Fab Lab that we can cover quickly. In the upper left, we lasered some different parts for our local distillery to showcase their items. We've done chocolate molds for graduation classes. Molds for local florists. You can hear the CNC machine going, so you can watch that in process right now. We do a lot of work with local artists. On the lower left, you can see some architectural pieces that we printed out, architectural designs for local architects to help them compete. Even dog waste boxes for downtown, the flipping mechanisms were part of that. We've created a lot of our own merchandise here locally to support some of our local events. Some of the things that we encourage people to understand is you've got to be really flexible within a fabrication lab, because people are bringing new concepts, but they don't necessarily have everything worked out there, and some of their concepts just don't work. Spending on things like heated beds for your 3D printer is really important, and know that you'll work with a lot of artists and people that are working on side gigs. So they're going to have limited time frame to work with you. Failures can and will happen within fabrication labs, but that's part of the learning process. And we've had some really interesting products actually result from failures. And then our last section that we're going to talk about briefly is just pitch events and public speaking contests. This is something that's important to break that stigma of not sharing your items or concepts with the general public, while also creating the opportunity for different funding. So what we found with entrepreneurial events in high school and collegiate levels was they did a great job with creating pitches for folks that were public speaking events, but not so great in converting those to actual businesses. And that's our goal. So our goals were to start a business, to create more people that would patronize entrepreneurs, and to support entrepreneurial development and ecosystems within the community. So we created a variation of what Wheeling, West Virginia was doing with the show of hands concept. We ripped off and duplicated the show of hands piece. Sometimes those are called adult pitch competitions, which is kind of a misnomer because it's not really competition, nor is it restricted to adults. There are high functioning events that you can R&D from Main Streets throughout the community, and this is one of them that we learned about during Brookings study. Basically, we raise dollars through local banks and ticket prices for people to come into an event, and they vote on the pitches that they like best. Those pitches are vetted through us. So it's a really simple event to set up, but of the 14 businesses that have gone through show of hands, we've had 10 that have started up in the last couple of years. So it's been an effective mechanism to help those businesses start up. I think one of the critical elements for show of hands is you don't get paid until you actually incur startup costs. So you're not getting prize money for doing a pitch. You're getting a check that is offsetting some of the expenses associated with your actual concept. This helps us create community buy-in and business buy-in and panel participation within the event or activity. So we're excited as a community for these different businesses, and we move on as a community and get behind some of these different entrepreneurs as they're getting started. And those public presentations lead to additional opportunities and collaborations. We're not talking about a lot of money with these events. It's under 20K that we're raising in total, mainly through those ticket prices and local banks with their community reinvestment acts. Expenditures. And again, if they don't have progress, they're not getting money. So there's the incentive to actually start up. One of the things that we try and accomplish within these pitch them plan activities is investor follow-up. So some of them need additional expenditures to help get their business where they need to go. And we've got loan programs and other investors that we connect them with. And then we develop support plans for SYOB folks and then the pitch them plan individuals to make sure that they have what they need to continue to grow their concept out of the theoretical stage. One quick pitch for us, if you want to get your hands on actual makerspace or fabrication lab activities, we're hosting a makerspace summit that will be in Emporia on September 20th. And we welcome all of you to attend that particular summit and learn about financing and support and get your hands on some of the materials and actually take a tour of our fabrication lab. So if you're interested in that, just message me and we'll get you connected with with the folks that you need to get connected with. This is my contact information. So you can email me at director@emporiamainstreet.com, or you can just look me up at emporiamainstreet.com for a phone conversation, and I'm always happy to help. What questions do you folks have?
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. I'm going to let folks put in some of their questions. I've already got a couple here, and then I have some of my own questions. I'm going to stop sharing your screen, or yeah, so we can see everybody's faces. So Casey, I love the idea of you guys, of course, have 16 years experience doing this, particularly with your start your own business, being 16 years old, kind of have worked in all aspects of it. So, you know, the start your own business, then into business incubation, then into the fabrication lab, and then into the pitch event. So kind of covering the whole environment of supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem. The part I didn't see that we hear about, and maybe you guys have learned that they're just not that important, is some of those social, non-programmed things to attract entrepreneurs to meet each other, realize they're not doing this on their own, and kind of create that team aspect that you talked about. Do you do any of those sort of social events for entrepreneurs?
We do, but it takes a while for those entrepreneurs to open up because again, there's this stigma, don't share your concept or somebody's going to steal it. Right. So we have to start with we'll start your own business class in a safe environment, working with them in our office in a controlled environment. And then working through our local committees, or the show of hands is more of a social, there's a social aspect to that, as they're interacting with community members, and some of our other community activities that we encourage them to pop up in to practice selling their items. There's a social aspect to all of those.
Okay, great. So you're start your own business class, been doing it for 16 years. You do that once a year, you do it every other year. How often do you do that? And if folks want to come see one, just to see a class, you mentioned the whole Main Street mantra of R&D, rip off and duplicate. Because I do have some other questions about when is the next pitch event, some of those things. So if people just wanted to come and see one of the classes and kind of learn from that, can they do that? And how often do you do those?
Yep, we run the SYOB class once a year in October, second week of October, and they run as a Monday, Thursday night class from 6 to 9. And then the eTech startups class runs in the spring. So that's for tech or product-based businesses. Again, a Monday, Thursday night class that runs about 3 hours. And we have Main Street groups that audit those all the time. And we've provided curriculum to other groups. I've zoomed in to other communities. If you're close, I've driven in to teach the marketing class, which tends to be one of the roughest classes to get people started. Yeah, we're there to help with that rip off and duplicate effort.
Sure. And if I remember from the national presentation, some of that curriculum is, helping entrepreneurs work on more of the culture of their company and the HR aspects of their company, because a lot of times, they may not have those skills and assets that in their repertoire, and so helping with some of those other soft skills.
Yeah, and it's critical that you set up your company correctly, because you want to be an attractive place for people to work. And that will allow you to scale. And frankly, as an entrepreneur, you may want to take a day off on occasion. So if you don't have the right corporate culture or community culture that you've developed, it'll be difficult for you to maintain your business.
Right. One of the best sessions I attended was in Richmond, and it was on a local program that started their own classes for entrepreneurs, because they were finding that, they just don't happen overnight, and that you have to cultivate that and plant the seeds and all that. So I think it's so important to have that direct engagement and education component for small business owners that we're trying to attract to our districts. If we don't have them in quantity already, then we need to grow them. And so I think that's a great way to do that. So moving on to business incubation, I have a question. The question is from Warrensburg, because they do have an incubator space. It says, do you have a structured lease or program outlined for your incubator program? We currently have a successful barbershop in our space, and the incubator space works perfectly for them, and they see no need or desire to want to move out.
Yes, we do. And that having those responsibilities laid out initially is critically important. And actually, that's one of the pieces of documentation that we have within the link. Our incubator program is for a maximum of 18 months. So you get 6 months of free rent, 6 months of reduced market rate rent, and 6 months of time to find a new home rent. And then at the end of that period, if there's something going on with a development issue that they're going to be a few weeks off, we'll accommodate that. But otherwise, they know from the beginning that this is a temporary arrangement, and it's our goal to fill the space with additional quality businesses to populate the entire downtown.
Sure. And I know in this Main Street's case, and I'm sure it's with others too, is that, okay, now we run into the other problem, which maybe Emporia has had too, is that there are not any spaces that are move-in ready. And so we either have occupied spaces, or we have spaces that are going to take a year to get ready to go for somebody to occupy it. So have you had that, and how do you deal with that?
Well, that's the wonderful thing about having the 18 months. When we get a business that started there, we can work with developers right off the bat to say, if this business goes the way we think, well, these are going to be their needs. And then they have expected rent rates, and we can work on a performance analysis and develop that financing plan to get people into that space. So we're planning their exit almost as soon as they enter, and that's an important part of that development process.
And Main Street is kind of that connector person and working with the developers or the property owners to create that space.
Because we've got a historic district, so we work with historic tax credits, and we all work with our different loan programs, and we've got a good relationship with a variety of different contractors. So we're identifying a multitude of opportunities really early on, so that there's not this shock of, well, it's your last month, hope you find something.
Right.
We're working that into the incubation process immediately.
Sure. And so from a Main Street 4.0 approach, I'm assuming that the EV, Economic Vitality Committee, is doing a lot of this on the Main Street's side.
Yeah, it's a combination effort where we have EV that's working on that business development side and identifying resources. Design gets involved when they're looking at the spaces and how that can incorporate within the look and feel of our downtown, and making sure that they have a quality space. Promotion is getting the community involved, and oftentimes our incubated business is a case study for our promotions committee to talk about the market that they're intersecting with and how we can assist. And then, of course, there are some funding aspects that are involved with incubation. So really touches all 4 points, but economic vitality is probably the heaviest.
Okay. I'm going to come back to funding in just a second, but while we're still on incubation, I love the part about still, once you get a business that you're incubating in your space, it's not hands off after that. Main Street has a very active role in helping them be successful, because I think a lot of times we're like, okay, here's the space, make it or break it, and I think it's important to provide that support and not be hands off.
We talk to our Imaginarium incubated business almost every day. And our building is actually designed to encourage that sort of interaction. So the incubator is attached, and we share restrooms, and we have a little kitchenette and different things that was built as part of a capital campaign. But we interact with them every day, so they know if they have a question, they just pop over, or if they need to use the copier, or if they want to get involved with an event or activity or just ask advice, we're there the entire time.
Okay. And so a question from the participants is, how do you deal with someone who is truly not the right person or has a truly bad idea?
We're honest with them about the need to pivot their idea. And my favorite that I ever dealt with, we had a guy come in that wanted to start a bridal boutique. That I had experience with that industry early on, and that's terrifying. But he wanted to start a bridal boutique, but also a Christian bookstore within that, which is fine. And then he really liked antique banjos, so he wanted antique banjos that were part of it. And then he really liked shotguns and shooting sports. And I thought that was a joke, and I said, shotgun wedding, that probably isn't a thing. But he was dead serious, and we said, great business concepts are like children's books. They're really easy to understand the story behind them. And he ended up pivoting out of that into an Amish woodwork store, which is very successful now. And he'll say, I'm glad that you told me that wasn't a great idea, because it allowed me to find the better idea. Nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly, and their business concept is their baby. Right. But it's sometimes our job to help guide people to success.
Right. And not every idea is a good idea. And being honest about it is so important. We had a community that had a gun shop and a florist, and it was called Guns N' Roses. Nice. And they got sued though, because of the name. And so that didn't work out so well. So to the funding piece, I want to talk about kind of funding and partnerships. You mentioned USDA, but what is the relationship with this SBDC, the Small Business Development Centers that you guys have had? And because a lot of our communities have those or can tap into them.
Yeah, we've got a fantastic relationship with our Small Business Development Center. Lisa Brumbaugh participates in our Start Your Own Business class, and there's a accounting session where she talks about cash flow projections, and she teaches that portion of the class. And then we work collaboratively. She works on the business plan side. I work on the finance plan side to make sure that people have the resources they need. So she's a very, very valuable team member.
Okay. And those are usually tied to universities. So, find your nearest university, and there should be a small business development center there that you can tap into as a Main Street program for some of these efforts. So on the funding side of things, how do you fund the various things? Your start your own business classes, your incubation space, the Fab Lab, pitch events. What's kind of the funding if folks are interested in starting one or all of those? Where are some funding sources?
Yeah, SYOB is really inexpensive to put on. Part of that is funded through the class fees. And again, that's $100. And we find that if somebody can't scrape up $100 to take a class, they're probably also not going to be able to scrape up money to start a business. So right. Don't be afraid to charge for that. And then our local banks, they have Community Reinvestment Act dollars that they have to contribute. And when we say, well, you're going to contribute these dollars, but they're probably going to come back to you for a business loan, that makes that process a little easier. Right. SYOB is funded through both of those. When it comes to our business incubator, we had a capital campaign that built out our building, but there's rent that's part of that for the second and third 6-month periods, and that flows into just building maintenance and support. So that once it was built is kind of self-funded, and the way our contract reads, they're responsible for a portion of the taxes on the building and their own utilities. So they get used to those line items, and they're not a shock when they move out. When it comes to the folks that go through the show of hands, that's a community donation effort. So we have some people that donate cash, again, banks or accountants or attorneys. We have some people that will donate items, like our local radio stations and newspapers will donate advertising, or accountants will donate consultations or 6 months worth of free services. So there's cash and cash equivalents. And then those people that are buying tickets, they're buying a singular ticket, a $10 ticket to enter, but they can buy as many tickets as they want. So we have some people that will spend $400 on tickets, and then they use those tickets to vote for the concepts that they like, and those tickets are converted into cash grants.
Right. And what about your fabrication lab?
Fabrication lab, the build out of the facility was part of our capital campaign, but the equipment was funded primarily through a matching USDA RDBG grant. Okay. And so we've got a great relationship with our USDA. They love the fabrication lab, and now that it's up and running, we've developed all sorts of different conduits for potential expansion funding in the future.
Great. Yeah, if you're a Main Street and haven't looked at USDA grants, either RBDG or RCDI, USDA has become more familiar with Main Streets and what they do, and really like the concepts. I have two other simple questions. When is the next pitch event? I think somebody wants to attend.
Yeah. So our next pitch events, show of hands, will be in the spring of 2024. So we'll have that usually at the beginning of March. Okay.
Yeah, and if you're not following Emporia Main Street on social media and stuff, you should do that, because then they would find out about all these things. And then the next one, is there a fee for the summit in Emporia, the one you did the commercial for, I believe is what they're asking.
Yeah, I think they're Network Kansas is running that, so there's going to be like a $30 charge is what they're talking about. But there's going to be scholarships to offset that. They want to make sure that everybody can attend. But you'll hear from other fabrication labs and maker spaces, entrepreneurs that have utilized those spaces, our partners, both funding and otherwise, and then again get to go through the actual space and maybe get your hands on some things that we're building out.
Okay. Great. Well, I don't have any more questions. I think that presentation was wonderful. Thank you, Casey. Great information. You guys have certainly You know, I think it's the concept of small business owners too, but you guys have applied it in the Main Street world and supporting entrepreneurs. In over 16 years of doing this, you learn each time you do it, and what's working and what's not, and how do we alter it and make it successful. And so you're a great case study yourselves in how to develop all this from start to finish. So I think that's wonderful. Thank you for
Well,
sharing.
thank you. I appreciate that. And that's really the important part. Listen to your entrepreneurs. They're going to tell you what they need. And
Right.
then that's a barrier. Knock down those barriers, and or at least take away the excuses, and then find different ways to help people achieve success. And then your community succeed as a result.
And I think this is so important to show what other Main Streets are doing, because we hear all the time, you know, we need small business owners, we need small business owners, we have vacant spaces, and we need X, Y, and Z business, but they're not cultivating that themselves. It's kind of the, well, we'll just wait and wait for them to come to us. And you really have to be engaged to be successful.
Yeah, you can't hope. You gotta provide help.
That's right. That's right.
Through mentoring
right.
Main Street.
Yeah, it has to be interactive. Yeah, yeah. Perfect. Thank you,
Great
Casey.
job.
We appreciate it. I'm going to do a quick commercial for our next Mornings on Main, which is October 1st. We are still developing the topic, so we'll keep you posted as we determine what that is. But if you have any thoughts on Mornings on Main topic, you'll get an email tomorrow with a survey link. We always appreciate you filling out the survey. We need those survey results to know how we're doing and what we can do better, and potential topics. So please take that survey and give us some ideas. Casey, again, thank you very much for all your efforts there, and then encourage anybody and everybody to go visit Emporia.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.